digest the food. Parasites are to help you digest food. They're not to eat you up. They're not to kill you. They help every animal's digestive system. And that can be proved if you go to Joel Weinstock, Dr. Joel Weinstock, who is a gastroenterologist at Iowa University. Over 20 years ago, he started noticing, he came from a farm background, and he noticed that the pigs at the agricultural department in his college were very sick. They were too clean, he surmised, because they had no trichinosis. They didn't have anything that was natural to the pigs that were out wallowing in the mud with all their bacteria and parasites. And all those animals were happy. So he took some of the trichinosis from these farm animals and introduced it into the intestines of these overly clean pigs. And they got happy and healthy again. So he got a permit from the FDA to try it with 6 people, 6 humans. And those humans had to have been under medical treatment for at least 10 years, up to 32 years. He chose 6 people that had suffered with inflammatory bowel syndrome from 10 to 32 years. If anybody knows inflammatory bowel syndrome, it's almost everything you eat and drink causes an allergy. It causes vomit, diarrhea, or severe nausea. Headaches, a lot. Intestinal cramping, a lot. Almost all the time. Anything you eat or drink, even water. So the FDA says that you have to be treated by the medical profession for 10 years before you're allowed to do anything else. Now that isn't a bunch of horse, I don't know. Oh, well, you have to suffer with our system, even if it doesn't work for 10 years, then you can go do something else. Not good. But he gave 6 people trichinosis. And we're told trichinosis, worst thing you could have. Kill you. Destroy your intestines, kill you. 5 of the 6 people in 1 week were completely symptom-free. People who suffered for up to 32 years were symptom-free in 6 days. One person didn't respond. He didn't have any side effects, no problem with the trichinosis, but all the other 5 got well. And guess what? They were back 6 months later asking for more because they started getting symptoms again because they kept to their old way of eating. They didn't adjust it. They just kept doing what they had done all their lives, doing the same old garbage, eating the same old stuff. So they started getting symptoms again. Now, if you go on to the University of Iowa, I don't think you can get it right off their website, but there's a group of doctors who now culture it, and you can buy it off the internet. Get your own little supply, your own little pets for your intestines. Now, what do parasites do? Intestinal parasites like that, they eat some of the meat to pre-digest it for you because you're not well enough to do it on your own. Now, that happened with, when cavemen were around because they didn't eat meat as often as they needed to, or as we do, 3 times a day. They maybe had it every other day or every 3 or 4 days. So when they finally got the meat into the system, they would eat and gorge so much. They had the gallbladder for the excess fat, but not the excess hydrochloric acid to digest all that meat. That's where parasites come in. Tapeworms, trichinosis. All of these things help you digest food. Now, there's plenty of research now. You can look it up. Look under whipworm, trichinosis, state of Iowa, and you will come up with a lot of hits on the last 12 years on the research that's been done with that, and you'll probably find the link where you can buy it. I'm not saying that's the way to get it. I suggest my clients take a piece of small intestine of a pig and eat about a half a cup, and that's all it takes. For most people, half a cup about every 5 to 6 months. Then their pollution is so bad that's dumping from their body into their intestines. all the trichinosis gets poisoned with all the garbage in our environment, So then you have to breed some new ones or introduce some new ones into yourself. An example of that is the vaccine when I was 18 months old that caused me to be autistic. It also caused chronic constipation at that point. That the formaldehyde does that if it stays in the intestinal wall. So the formaldehyde went to my intestines and destroyed almost all the E. coli in my intestines. So my brain and nervous system weren't developing. That along with the mercury and the aluminum went into my brain. The way I know that is because I felt it. I started having headaches right at the center about 6 hours after I got the shot. And people say, "You remember at 18 months old?" I told my mother, I remember the day I was born. She says, "You're full of it. You're telling stories again." I said, "Well, I have stories to tell. Doesn't mean they're not true." So I said, "Mom, think about this. When I came out, there were Venetian blinds right on the left side as I was coming out, and I was coming back looking at the ceiling, and the sun was coming right over the horizon, right through the Venetian blinds." Her jaw hit the floor because that's exactly what happened. Wow. So I remember everything. I may have been an idiot communication-wise, but in the brain I was very aware of all that. So yes, I remember all those shots. I lost some track of time between the age of 3 and the age of 6. Some of that time was lost after a few more vaccines, but then I picked it up again after that. Anyway, parasites. I had constipation from 18 months old all the way up until 3 years ago, almost 2.5 years ago. When I was a child, before I went on to a raw diet, I had a bowel movement once every 3 to 5 days. And when it came out, it was like granite, big as my fist. My rectum was 2 inches of scar tissue by the time I hit 20 years old. 2 inches of scar tissue completely around the rectum. Kept splitting. Every time I had a bowel movement, I bled. So about 2.5, and then I went on to a raw diet. I moved every day, several times a day, but that first part of the day, after a long night's sleep and not going from about probably 3 o'clock on, it was hard and big. So I was doing some experiments fermenting food, fermenting grain and fermenting milk, because when you want to clean out something, bacteria and parasites are your best advantage. Why? Because they consume toxicity 100 times their weight. Parasites can eat 100 times their weight in 24 hours and pass only 1 to 5% waste. That's like eating 100 pounds of food a day and having a 1-pound bowel movement the next day, or to a 5-pound bowel movement. That's pretty efficient, isn't it? Pretty amazing. Okay? And all of that excretion that they give is finely digested matter. And it's not toxic unless they're eating something toxic, because we put that into our body. And that feeds the brain and nervous system rapidly and readily. So if the parasites are in there as janitors, eating dead tissue and bruised tissue, it's not their normal job, but that's what they will do to help us clean the system. So I decided that I would help create bacteria by fermenting all the foods that I ate a lot of. When I was a kid, I ate a lot of milk. I loved milk. And I would down the half gallon to a gallon a day, cereal or whatever. So I decided, since I was an avid cereal, and then when I went off on my own, a bachelor, sometimes I'd eat 2 boxes of cereal a day and nothing else but milk and cereal, And I was a junkie, because I